Tom Palmer, a children's author, and this is my coffee morning, which is why I got some coffee with me, to launch After the War, which is published today. And thank you very much for joining me for this coffee morning. It's just sort of quarter of an hour, and what I thought I'd do, as well as explaining the book After the War, I could show you around my writing room, and the most important thing in my writing room at the moment is, come here, is Finn. This is Finn, my dog. You're bored already. Who likes to sit in my room with me sometimes when he's that way inclined, and so he's here today, which is good. So I'm going to show you around my office, and in doing that, I'm going to sort of give you an idea of how I write. So I've got things over there on my desk which I'll show you about how I wrote After the War. And I've got some other things there like how I do plans, and I've got 3 or 4 projects on the go. So I'll show you all of that as we go around the room, and that should give you an idea of how and why I write. And the main reason I write is here. These are the books I love to read. I love reading. I didn't used to like reading, but what got me into reading, it was magazines like these, like Shoot magazine and Match of the Day magazine and Roy of the Rovers. They're the things that encouraged me to read. And once I got into reading about what I loved, which was football, I got into reading more broadly. So for instance, when I began reading, I got into fiction, and I got into fiction set in other countries. So I really got into Emile Zola. I really loved his stories because he does really gritty, very realistic, quite I suppose, dark but realistic stories. What else did I like to read? I used to like to read travel writing, so I'd read books about places you could travel to around the world. I really enjoyed that, and actually that one book stands out for me, if I can find it, and there he is. This author, I remember I went to Leeds Library and borrowed the first one of these books called For Bread Alone by Mohammed Shukri, and it's set in the Atlas Mountains in the north of the Sahara Desert. And I read that book and I thought, I really want to go there. I want to go to that place. And so I found out some charity walks in the Sahara Desert. You could raise money for a charity that was really important to me. So I went on a charity walk in that area because I'd read this book, and I had a lovely time. It was a really good time for me, and that's where I met my wife. So if I hadn't have gone to Leeds Libraries, if I hadn't have read this book, I would never have met my wife, and my life would have turned out very differently, I am quite sure. Anyway, so these are my books, and every one of those books, I always like to see them, every one of those books has influenced my life, and mostly, I think, made my life better. And when I was writing After the War, it was really important, as well as to listen to and meet survivors of the Holocaust, because this is about children who survived the Holocaust, and it was really important to read as much as I could. So this is some of the books that I read. So for instance, I read this book. This is called The Boys, and that's the actual historic story of the children who came to Windermere after surviving the concentration camps. And this tells you in a lot of detail, and Martin Gilbert, who was a very famous historian, documented that really well. I also sought out fiction that had been written about the Holocaust that I thought was really important that I should read. For instance, Schindler's Ark, a really good book I read by Anne Home called I Am David, but also biographies. So the children that I base these stories on, some of them are still alive and some of them have written books. So I read this, which was by one of the boys who came over from the concentration camps to live in the Lake District, and I read this book by Arik Hirsch as well. So biographies telling me exactly what had happened to those people who I was trying to write a story about. And that's why I hope that After the War is very accurate. It reflects very much what happened to the boys who I'm trying to write about. Anyway, so that's my books. So what else? So in my office, this is kind of the main office wall. I've done stuff to do with like VE Day. So After the War is set on VJ Day, and so it also includes a passage to do with VE Day. So I've got some of this stuff in my office to help me get into the vibe. This is a shield that my daughter painted for me when I was doing my books Defenders books to do with hauntings from history. My daughter did this brilliant shield that I took into schools. So I've got stuff like that. A lot of the stuff in here is stuff I use when I go into schools. Moving on very smoothly, let me introduce you to Roy and Rocky. So we've got Roy and Rocky, and they are two of the characters, the two main characters from my Roy and the Rovers books. This is where I sit when I'm doing school events. I bring the camera a bit closer, and I'll talk about how I write books. I'll talk about how I read like newspapers and magazines and how they're really important to me. And I'll talk about my books as well. But I'll also talk about the things that inspire me to write a book. So with After the War, which I've got a copy here. With After the War, it was really important for me to get my facts right. So I've shown you the books that I read, and I also read a lot on, there's a website called ldhp.co.uk, which is recordings of the boys who are the survivors of this, and I listened to those a lot, and I noted them down in my notebook. So this was my notebook for the After the War, and I read loads of books, listened to loads of interviews, watched films, visited the Lake District, visited Krakow, and Auschwitz and other places. And I made loads of notes. As well as making notes, though, it was really important for me to keep a visual record as like notes. I kept a visual record in this scrapbook. So I kept images of the boys when they arrived in this country. I had a map of the places that I need to go to. So cross-referencing and making sure I had my settings right. So you've got your settings, you've got your characters. One thing I'd really like to show you is this, because when I was writing After the War, I was really lucky. I met some of the survivors who'd survived the Holocaust, but I also met some of the people. This is a family that lived where the boys came to live when they lived in this country after the concentration camps. And in the middle, you can see a girl in the slightly darker dress with a dog on her knee. And that is the girl now. That's Joyce. And Joyce has been wonderful, and her family have really helped me with the book. So they give me lots of ideas, and a lot of the stories in After the War have come from the boys, from the survivors, and some from Joyce as well, because I wanted to make sure that I included the local people from Cumbria in the story as well. And I keep a scrapbook like this to just keep all my ideas and thoughts together in a visual way, like with maps and stuff like that. So, but artifacts, I think artifacts are really important too. So for instance, in After the War, the boys arrive on an aeroplane in England. They touch down at Crosby-on-Eden Airport, which is near Carlisle. And there's pictures. I've got it in here. I think I've got it in here. Yes, there it is. So there's a picture there of three of the boys when they'd arrived in Calgarth, and one of them is wearing a pilot's hat, as you can see. If you look really closely there, the one in the middle. And I've been very fortunate. The RAF museums have lent me one of the pilot's hats, and this is the one. And that really helped me, because can you imagine? It's hard to imagine being... You've come from the concentration camps. The worst things have happened to you and your families that are possible to imagine. And one of the pilots, it must have given, and certainly does in my book, gives one of the boys, when they land in England, gives him his pilot's cap because he's interested in aeroplanes. And I think having something like this, they were also given bars of chocolate that would have looked roughly like this. I've actually eaten it, so it wasn't 75 years old though. So things like this and this really helped me get into the character that I'm trying to write about. So using visits to places, reading books like these, and the real artifacts from the past helped me get into sort of character for the characters I'm trying to write, as well as listening to their memories and basing things on their memories. So one thing I want to show you before we move on to something else, I'm not quite sure what, is this. So when I've made all these notes, I'm not very good at keeping stuff in my head, which is why I make loads of notes. There's I don't know, a couple of 100 hours worth of reading and watching things and notes in here. And this was the core for the book. If you actually went through this, you'd find all of it is come through this notebook from interviews and stuff like that. But how do you get all that stuff? How do you get it? And how do you put it into a story? It's really hard. And I know like planning is a big deal, and particularly in schools and elsewhere. This is the plan for after the war, the original plan for after the war. And as you can see, like there's each blue post-it note is a scene which happens which I have read about, and each green, yellow and orange bit is about one of the main characters and events happening to them. And what I did was I put these all on this piece of paper. It's longer, I haven't got the wingspan to deal with it, but I put them all on this piece of paper, and that allowed me to move them around. Because they're post-it notes, you can move them around and put them in different positions and put them in a way, in an order that makes sense. Every event is true and is based on a true memory, but I just put them in a different order to make the story more, I'm not sure if satisfying is the right word, but more engaging, more moving maybe. I don't know, I certainly didn't manipulate it to make it more moving, but I think to tell a story, the order that you tell things in, you can put them in a better order, and that helps make a better story. But I'm not articulating that very well. And part of the reason I think I'm quite good at planning is that I'm not very good at articulating things very well. Because if you plan things and put them down on paper, that means you're gonna be able to sort your thoughts out and not, I suppose, writing things down. I remember when I was a lot younger, I struggled to have conversations and talk, and I used to write stuff down, and I'd be able to put my thoughts in order, and then I'd be able to talk if I sort of practiced. I'm sure I'm not the only person who's done that, who feels a bit sort of shy. And I was thinking about it. Sometimes I think the reason I'm a writer is because of all that planning and wanting to write stuff down, because I couldn't deal that well with talking. Anyway, that's for another day, isn't it? Anyway, so this is where I sit when I'm doing school talks. I'm gonna take the camera now and show you around the rest of the office, because we'll be able to see more if I bring it with me. So it might be a bit jerky, but don't worry, I better drink some coffee, because this is a coffee morning. So cheers again. Right, so we're going to move around the rest of the office. I'm going to show you a few other things to do with my main desk and other things in my office, like in corners and stuff like that, just to give you an idea of what I get up to. Here we go. Right, so what have we got? We've got my hand. This stepladder is really important. This is here because when I'm doing school events, I've got a whiteboard. Two whiteboards in fact, and I use them to do sort of workshops with schools, so always available, competitive rates, so I use those, and the stepladder, as it's called, is really useful for me when I am setting up the camera. See here, so I set the camera up about here, and then it focuses on the board, so that's really good. What else? So we've seen this bit, we've seen Finn, haven't we? Say hello, Finn. He's fast asleep. Right, we've seen Roy and Rocky. This is something I want to show you. I'm sorry this is all jerky, but that's how it is. So this is a picture. You may have seen the Windermere Boys film, Windermere Children it was called. It came out in January 2020. And this is a picture. So you've got the five main actors, but you've also got the five main boys, the original men who came here 75 years ago, and this is them, and with the actors who plays their parts. You've also got next to them a photo of my mum, who was the one who encouraged me to read, and I like to have that there because she was great. Unfortunately, she's not with us anymore. Anyway, as a writer, I have to do a lot of promotion. I spend a lot of time promoting my books, and one of the things is I've got this pile of stuff. My publisher, Barrington Stoke, has very kindly sent me a load of posters, in fact. And if you get in touch, if you're a school or a library, if you get in touch and you want some of these posters, you're very welcome to if you get in touch via our website. I've got bookmarks and all this stuff. When a book comes out, you've kind of got to promote it. You've got to let people know about it. So I've got bookmarks as well. And they help me to promote the books that I've written, as does the bunting, which my wife made, which you can see behind me. Anyway, I'm going to move you on next. I must stop doing that with my hand, mustn't I? This is my desk. I wonder if I could put, hang on, I'll try and put this up here and then I can show you it. Is that going to work? If it falls down, forgive me. So, this is my desk, and this is where I have all the projects that I'm working on. In fact, no, I'm going to bring it over here. So this is my desk. So these are the projects I'm working on at the moment. And this is a story that I'm working on, which might be called The Worst Journey in the World, or it might be called At Sea. And it's a story about the Arctic convoys. And in each of these boxes, you've got a different book that I'm working on. So you've got At Sea, and that's all the material. That's the first draft of the novel that I've been working on. That's a dictionary companion that I'm going to go through and read through about lots of stuff to do with shipping and stuff like that. So that's the book I'm sort of writing at the moment. This is after the war. This has got lots of stuff like the local newspaper photographs I've used, things I've still got to do, so I can keep that all on the boil. This is the Roy of the Rovers box, and the next Roy of the Rovers book to come out is called Rocky of the Rovers. In fact, she's kind of taken over the book, and this is the manuscript that's finished, and that's coming out in October. This one is a secret project. I've hidden that under a football shirt, but that one is a secret project, and underneath that is a book that I'm working on at the moment. I've been sort of planning on it, but I've only, who have I told? I've told my best friend, my wife, my agent, and my daughter. And they're the only ones who I've told about that project so far, so I'm keeping that one a bit stum. What else? I think we've kind of got around the room, haven't we? Oh yeah, there's I like doing fell running, so they're some of my running numbers that I've done. And I'll just show you, I'm not sure if I showed you earlier, but this is where I keep the trophies that I've won for book awards, including that lovely one that's just come in from Wales this week. By the way, the one on the end there wasn't the one that I won. Anyway, so I thought I'd finish off this coffee morning by reading you a bit of the book. I suppose it makes sense because it's launch day, because it's the beginning of the book's life. I should read the beginning of the book. So I'll do that to finish off this session. And here we go. So this is after the war, and it's about a group of refugee Jewish children who have come to this country. They've survived the Holocaust. They've lost all of their families, although they're still searching. Very few of them are going to find their families. But this is how it was for them arriving in this country as refugees, which is something that obviously is still happening and has happened through the ages. And I suppose, as well as writing this about history and about how we need to be aware of the Holocaust and what happened, it's also about how we need to think about how we look after people coming from difficult, terribly difficult situations today. Even though he was afraid, Yossi forced himself to crawl to the window in the side of the aeroplane. There were no seats, so he had to crouch and stay on all fours as he and the other passengers were thrown about by turbulence. Outside, he could see a wall of white and a wing wobbling so hard it looked like it might fall off. Behind him, Yossi heard children cry out, the sound of at least one person being sick, and some laughter too. "Come and sit down here, Yossi," a woman's voice called out. Yossi did as he was told, scrambling along the floor of the Sterling bomber to rejoin the other children and adults sitting on blankets. Yossi loved aeroplanes. He should have been scared of them, as the first time he'd seen one 6 years ago at the beginning of the war, a German bomber had tried to destroy his hometown in Poland. Then, over the following years, he'd seen bombs falling from British and American aeroplanes, targeting the factories where he was forced to work. But he still loved them. Perhaps because aeroplanes were a sign that change was coming. And once he was in the concentration camps, Yossi was desperate for change. So that's the beginning of the story, and it is a story of the Holocaust, and there is material in there I certainly wouldn't give to any children beneath year 5. I think in a year 5 class, some year 5 classes would be alright, and some it might be a bit much for, certainly in the early months of year 5, because it's the story of when they come to this country and how they build friendships to help them move into the future, but it's also the events that happen to them. So it flashes back to certain events in the concentration camps and on death marches, and one reason I did that is because when I was working on it, I went to a school in Grasmere, very near Windermere, and the children there, year 5s and 6s, were very insistent that I say what happened, I say what a death march was, and I say what a concentration camp was, and try to explain how and why it happened, if that's possible at all. And so the book does go into some detail, but obviously it goes up to a certain point because it's a children's book. But I'd certainly say anyone, definitely year 6 and upwards, but perhaps and year 5, I'd sort of decide based on the class or the child. Anyway, that's after the war. I hope you've enjoyed this slightly erratic coffee morning, but as you can see, I'm not terribly comfortable with coffee mornings. But thank you for joining me, and thank you. I'd like to say, I know some of you watching this will have already given this book some support, and I'd really like to say thank you for that, because since I've been writing this book, and since this book has started to be promoted, I've had such lovely support and such kindness from historians of the Holocaust, and teachers and librarians and friends, and the support I've had has been wonderful. So, and I'm really grateful for that. So I thank you now, and I should say as well, thank you to my family who've put up with me occasionally being a bit gloomy while writing it, but I'm really glad I did it, and I hope if you get the chance to read it, I hope that you enjoy it, and let's raise a cup, not to the book, but let's raise a cup to the boys, to the survivors who survived the Holocaust and came to live in this country, because not only did they come here and survive, but they went on to build families and build businesses and become very proud British people, having been refugees 75 years ago. Thank you for listening.